Hello everyone, my name is Christopher Liam Rose. I'm an author, mentor, life coach, motivational speaker, evangelist, musician, and activist. Within the SGR podcast, I've been sharing this podcast to inspire humanity to do spiritual music, which is so important. I've been sharing this SGR podcast to inspire humanity to learn about Jesus Christ, Jehovah, and Buddha through music and creation. And I've been sharing the SGR podcast to get people to understand the importance of spiritual music, faith, spirituality, faith, and religion. For today's podcast and audio, I've got it's a very interesting topic to talk about actually, and even before I was going to record this podcast and audio, I know this is a very interesting topic to talk about, and it's something that I want to spend some time talking about today. It's a very interesting topic, and it's a very good one to really learn, right? So the podcast and audio today is called Spiritual Music Will Change the World and Society. Now, for me, I could spend a lot of time actually talking about this and how important spiritual music will change our world and society. It's so important to learn this, and I think I've been given the opportunity to discuss it today. I think I've been given the opportunity to, so I want to try and share as much as I can in this podcast and audio today. Now, what I've been sharing within SGR podcasts currently at the moment, let's begin with this first, right? I've been trying to inspire those musicians, singers, songwriters, rappers, producers, artists to really go on the journey of spiritual music. Now, before we begin, I'm just going to find a definition of what spiritual music is, because this is what's very important to learn. And I think I was checking this, I think just a couple of days ago actually. I actually checked the definition of it. So we're just going to find it on Google now. I'm just going to type it in on the search box. So let's just really understand this for ourselves. So it says that spiritual music is a genre designed to uplift, heal, connect the listeners to the divine, inner self, or a community through shared faith and emotion. So let's just repeat that again. Spiritual music is a genre designed to uplift, heal, connect listeners to a divine inner self of the community through shared faith and emotion. So spiritual music is a shared faith and emotion connecting the community to inner self of the divine, right? So that's why even before I started to record this podcast, I was saying this subject is so interesting. It really is, right? So I don't want to go too deep into this, but I have to be as truthful as I can in this podcast today and this audio. Now, when we listen to the music of today, it's sort of about, I don't want to say this in a judgmental way. I'm not trying to get across in that way. I just want to get the truth into the podcast today. When we listen to the music today, it's very like boastful, proud, talking about materialistic things, money, houses and cars, and women and men, and love and romance, and like I don't know, there's just so much like different types of music out there, like rock and pop, and there's just so many genres of music. It's so hard to find the spiritual music through all of those genres, right? But when we're someone that becomes spiritual, right, faithful, truthful, spiritual music is a genre designed to uplift, heal, connect the listeners to the divine inner self of a community through shared faith and emotion. So when I say that spiritual music is going to change the world, it's going to change society, the music itself, right? Because it's faithful, it's spiritual, it's truthful, and it's emotional. The true essence of spiritual music, connecting to the inner self, the community of the divine. So that is what spiritual music is all about. The spiritual music of the connection, the faith, the spirituality, the faith, the religion, the emotion, right? So your music is meant to connect to the listeners, the fans, the followers, and the people that enjoy your music, right? So spiritual music is a different type of genre. It's not the same genre as other genres. It's a whole different way of doing music. Now, I think I said previously within a podcast before, an audio before, if I'm not mistaken before, I said that no matter what genre as a musician you choose to do, so it could be pop, it could be rock, it could be soul, it could be jazz, it could be funk, it could be Afro beats, it could be rap, it could be hip hop, it could be R&B, whatever genre you choose to do, make sure it's a spiritual music. Yes, yeah, you make sure it's spiritual music. Make sure it's spiritual, right? Because it's meant to uplift, heal, connect the listeners to the divine and the inner selves of the community of faith and emotion. So your spiritual music is meant to inspire. Now, how does spiritual music basically change the world? Let's just find this for ourselves. How does spiritual music change the world? Because I think the spiritual music is what the world needs at the moment. We need more spiritual musicians. So spiritual music transforms the world by breaking down barriers of race, religion, and classes, foreign unity and love. So that is what spiritual music is all about. It connects you to faith, religion, unity, and love. And race, right, of all human beings, right? So as a spiritual musician, artist, rapper, singer, songwriter, producer, you're meant to be making spiritual music that connects to people in the world and the listeners and the followers and the fans and the family and friends also, right? So it's meant to be spiritual. It's meant to connect. It's meant to transform, change, encourage the listeners, encourage the viewers, and just support those people that listen to the music. Now, spiritual music is the change of life, right? It's so I've explained this so many times. Like, spiritual music is the change of life. Your spiritual music. Now, this is a very tricky topic to talk about as well. Also. Now, as a musician, artist, rapper, singer, songwriter, or producer, I'm not saying you can't make music, and I'm not saying you can't do the music that you truly love and care about. I actually, as a musician myself, sharing this podcast on audio, I encourage any artist, any musician, any rapper, any songwriter, any producer, any artist to make the music that they want to make and really want to do. It's completely fine. The slight difference of what I'm trying to get across in this audio podcast today is the spiritual music. So you want your spiritual music to connect to the listeners. Spiritual music is what's changing the world at the moment. There's only I can be honest in the podcast today and the audio today. I don't know many spiritual musicians who are creating the religious, faithful, spiritual music at the moment. I'm not saying there isn't musicians, and I'm not saying there isn't artists. There's always artists and there's always musicians. There always is. But I'm really getting to the point of those ones that are creating spiritual music. The inner community, faith and emotion for the listeners, right? Now, how does spiritual music change the world? Spiritual music changes the world in a number of different ways. Number one, through spiritual music, you get to learn about Jesus Christ, Jehovah, and Buddha through the music you create. As a musician, you don't have to just create one genre. And I don't think people should just say, I'm just going to create this type of music and that's all I'm going to create. As a musician, you've got the opportunity to create whatever genre you like, so long as it has that spiritual essence to it, the spiritual music. So, discover, develop your music, grow your music, change your lyrics, change your production, change your songs. Go on the journey of spiritual music. The second way of how spiritual music changes the world and society is that we actually learn about faith, spirituality, faith and religion through spiritual music. So you get to know how it is to be faithful, spiritual, faith and religion within spiritual music. So this becomes very important because I've always said if we don't have a faith, religion, faith or spirituality, then we're going to really struggle in life. We're going to find things difficult. So spiritual music connects those listeners to faith, spirituality, faith and religion. The third way of how spiritual music really connects to world change and society is that we get to appreciate the gifts of the spiritual music, the messages and the songs of what it's producing, and even the instrumentals and the beats of what it's producing, because it's always spiritual. There's always an essence to it. It's very, very spiritual, which connects more listeners, connects more viewers, connects more followers, and grows as spiritual music grows. The fourth way of how spiritual music really changes the world and society is that we get to really understand that Jesus Christ, Jehovah and Buddha wants us to show our gifts through the spiritual music we create. So the music we create always shows our gifts. It always shows who we are, and that's it's as a musician, if you are actually a musician or a rapper or a singer or a songwriter or an artist in some kind of way, you'll know how important it is when you where you create music and someone listens to your music. It's a very spiritual thing. As a musician, it matters more than anything else, as you already know as a musician. So we want our music to show Jesus Christ, Jehovah and Buddha throughout it, through the faith, spirituality, faith and religion. And also with spiritual music, how it changes the world and society is that it breaks all barriers. So it goes through communities, people, fans, followers, listeners in different ways. Everyone learns something new along the journey of the spiritual music, and it inspires those people who listen to it. And I've always said as a musician, we're trying to inspire people here. That's the main essence of being a musician. As being a musician, you want to inspire. You want to help those listeners to learn from your music and listen to your music and grow with your music. So it's so important that we create spiritual music that's going to inspire those listeners, right? So, and then basically the fifth or the sixth way of how spiritual music changes the world and society is that it changes yourself. As your spiritual music grows and as you grow as a musician, then you discover the no self, selflessness and know thyself. And your music becomes, what I've always said, a contribution. So it's so spiritual and it's so much of a contribution that it just inspires those listeners, inspires those fans and those followers to really learn more about you as a musician. So I've said a few things of how spiritual music can change the world and society. Number one, it can change world and society from learning about Jesus Christ, Jehovah and Buddha. Number two, it can change the world and society by learning about faith, spirituality and religion and faith. Number three, it can change the world and society by spiritually changing yourself and learning the know self, selflessness and know thyself. Number four, it can change the world and society by connecting all human beings, listeners, followers, fans to you as an artist, as a musician. And then number 4 and 5, it can change spiritual world and society by basically creating spiritual music that inspires those listeners and those fans and those followers. So, and I did say in the podcast and audio, as a musician, you already know this, viewers and listeners, that nothing is more important than people listening to your music. And you know how important it is. And you know, as a musician, that's where your fulfillment is. When like a follower or a fan or a listener says, your music's changed my life, and I've learned so much from your songs and your production and your songwriting and your music. So we always want spiritual music to inspire those listeners, those followers, those fans, those people that listen to the music. And hopefully through making spiritual music we change the world and society. And also as well, what I've learned on my journey as a musician, I'm not a successful musician at all. I'm actually just an independent musician. I'm not successful at all. But what I've learned on my journey with the spiritual music that I'm trying to express in this podcast and audio is that this is what I've really learned, and this is what's important for the musicians that want to go on this journey. How spiritual music changes the world of society is, for me, it really is this one. When the spiritual music creates spiritual change for the listeners, the followers, the fans, and the viewers, right? So your spiritual music creates spiritual change. Your spiritual music creates spiritual change. Your spiritual music creates spiritual change. And that's how I think the world and society changes. When your spiritual music creates spiritual change. Which, like I said, it doesn't matter what genre you do the music in. It could be hip-hop, it could be rap, it could be soul, it could be pop, it could be rock, it could be Christian, it could be gospel, it could be religious music, spiritual music, meditation music. The list can go on with what genre it could be, so long as it has the spiritual essence to it. The spiritual essence. And just before we finish this podcast and audio, because I can actually spend hours talking about this topic, just to go back to the definition of what spiritual music is. Spiritual music is the genre designed to uplift, heal, connect listeners to the divine inner self of a community through shared faith and emotion. So your spiritual music is meant to uplift, heal, connect the listeners to divine inner selves, which is spiritual change, of community through shared faith and emotion. Just before we finish, all music is basically feelings and emotions. In basically, as you as an artist, right? So as an artist, when you make your music, and all musicians will know what I'm talking about when I say this, it's normally a story of your life, some part of your life that you've created within a song or a beat or instrumental, right? So when spiritual music connects to that faith, that emotion, helps the listener, helps the listeners, helps the followers, helps the fans, right? It really connects with them, right? That becomes an inspiration. As a spiritual musician, you will get more followers, fans, and subscribers, if you want to call it, and listeners that check out your music because it's inspiring, it's motivational, it's inspirational, it's encouraging, right? So with spiritual music, you can do it in any genre, and that's why I've always said with the spiritual music, you do it in any genre. And that's the thing. As a musician, wouldn't we want to make the spiritual music to inspire those listeners, those followers, those fans, those friends, and family members who listen to the music? As a musician, as an artist, our whole essence is to share our music. The only difference between... I don't want to say this in a rude way, but... I don't want to say this in a rude way, I'll say it. The only difference between like world music, in the sense of world music, like I said earlier, the materialistic things, the money, the house, the car, the girlfriends, the friendships, the relationships, the romance, the love, like financial things, materialistic things, The only slight difference between the spiritual music and the worldly music is this. Spiritual music connects you with Jesus Christ, Jehovah, and Buddha, and faith, spirituality, faith, and religion. And then the worldly music is just, we normally call it a good track, a great song, a good instrumental, or a good beat. But there's no feeling there, there's no emotion there, there's no healing there, there's no uplifting there, there's no divineness within it, there's no transformation within it, there's no sorry for laughing, there's no like community with it within it, sort of thing. So my message is simple for this podcast and audio today, though. As a musician, if we want to change the world of society and have music that inspires those listeners, those followers, and those fans, right? And as a musician, all music should be spiritual. And what's spiritual music again? Connecting to faith, spirituality, faith, religion, which automatically connects you in music. So before we finish, let me just say this as well. Like from the spiritual music that you can create, right? It will inspire those listeners. It will inspire those followers. It will inspire those people that listen to it, and it's so important, right? So, as a musician, try your best to make spiritual music. If the music uplifts, heals, connects the listeners to the divine of Jehovah, Jesus Christ, and Buddha, then as a spiritual musician, you'll be doing your role within your music, spiritual abilities. All musicians are gifted. All musicians are talented. All musicians have a gift and a talent. The only difference between, like I said earlier, the world music and spiritual music, the world music is about clubbing, alcohol, drugs, socializing, relationships, love, romance, money, houses, cars, and materialistic things. The spiritual music is about faith, spirituality, faith and religion, Jehovah, Jesus Christ, and Buddha. So the spiritual music will change the world of society through spiritual change. That's how the spiritual music changes the world of society through spiritual change. If your spiritual music can create spiritual change, then that's when people transform. Sometimes as a musician, I don't know if all musicians get to this point though. I think some musicians can get to this point. I don't think all musicians get to this point. Sometimes as a musician, when you make spiritual music as a musician, you realise that all your songs, all your beats, all your production, all your songwriting has that spiritual essence to it. It just there's something about it that it's like so spiritual, right? And that inspires more people. That inspires more listeners, followers, and people that check out your music. So the reality is this: music is spiritual. Yeah. Once we learn that music is spiritual, which all music is spiritual because it comes from feelings and emotions. The only thing we have to do is connect our feelings and emotions to the divine, which is faith, spirituality, faith, and religion. And then when spiritual music is connected, aligned, and I'll normally call it like aligned. It's aligned. Like you're not just making music because it's like a pop song or a club anthem or so sorry for laughing. I shouldn't be laughing. So it's not like like spirit. sorry for laugh. I'm sorry for laughing. I'm sorry for laughing. Sorry for laughing. I'm just saying that, like, spiritual music isn't a club anthem or like, or like. Yeah, it's not. It's not like a club anthem or a hot tune or a hot record or an inspirational song. Spiritual music normally connects you to Jesus Christ, Jehovah, and Buddha, and faith and spirituality. So it's so important to basically make spiritual music that changes the world and society in some way through spiritual change. And sorry for laughing because, I shouldn't have been laughing at the end of the podcast. I think, spiritual music is very important. It's good to make spiritual music, and, as a musician, if you really want to pursue this career or opportunity, and, try your best to make spiritual music, and try your best to see, as a musician, how many, spiritual songs you can create and beats and instrumentals you can do. So, I think I'm finished for today's podcast and audio. Now, I could have spoken about this topic for hours, but, just remember, spiritual music is for Jesus Christ, Jehovah, and Buddha. And when you create spiritual music, it's meant to uplift, heal, connect listeners to the divine, and also community, and also faith and emotions and feelings also. So thank you for listening. I hope this has helped, and